Everyone likes a great deal, like savings, markdowns, and lunch specials. But when it comes to car insurance, we know the right place to go. State Farm offers surprisingly great rates for your ride. Your friends don't have to have a special connection or even call in a favor. State Farm has options like insuring your ride and your home, getting you great rates on both. Why are these such surprisingly great rates? It's what you get from them. Coverage that meets your needs. Because insurance shouldn't put a hole in your wallet. Those good neighbors are in your corner. No promo codes, no waiting around for holiday deals, and no sales section. State Farm fits your life at prices that fit your budget. So where do you go for surprisingly great rates? It's State Farm. Because like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm your co-host, Katie Halper.
And I'm Matt Taibbi. And this is I guess it's going to come out on Christmas Eve, right?
Indeed.
Right. So in the spirit of
Scrooge, we'll
just go right into the Democrats suck thing. So we have a great show today. And we'll, of course, our new habit is we just don't tell people who the guest is going to be.
Yeah.
I think this is a good one. I guess we got to start with this Jen Psaki clip. And when is this from exactly?
Early December.
Okay. All right. So we'll look at the Jen Psaki clip first.
Yeah. No gills, sadly. She's not wearing gills. Her gills are not visible.
Yeah, they're not visible.
Right, you're right. They don't go away there. In fact, I think maybe the gills are, the black part is right where the gills start. She has to cover them up because if they're white, you can see through white. You can see her gills.
Yeah, I mean, would they be? I wonder how they work. Do they sort of raise and go down, or do they open and close? I don't know.
I guess based on what we saw the last time she exposed her gills, they weren't opening and closing. So we can only imagine it's the up and down.
Yeah, or maybe it's something more sophisticated than we're used to here on Earth.
Right.
Anyway, so let's take a listen to the clip.
Look at what we've done over the course of time. We've quadrupled the size of our testing plan. We've cut the cost significantly over the past few months. And this effort to push to ensure insurers you're able to get your tests refunded means 150 million Americans will be able to get free tests.
Complicated though. Why not just make them free and give them out and have them available everywhere?
Should we just send one to every American?
Maybe.
Then what happens if every American has one test? How much does that cost? And then what happens after that?
All I know is that other countries seem to be making them available in greater quantities for less money.
Well, I think we share the same objective, which is to make them less expensive and more accessible, right? Every country is going to do that differently. And I was just noting that, again, our tests go through the FDA approval process. That's not the...
I mean, should we go to the punchline first, or should we talk about the absurdity of that review?
I mean, we can I think we can touch on the absurdity, right?
It's sort of classically like how Democrats answer questions. And look, Republican politicians have a completely different way of being ridiculous on these things, which is they tend to sort of veer off planet Earth immediately and say stuff that bears no relation to reality. What happens with people like Jen Psaki and that sort of Clintonian breed of spokesperson is they get genuinely angry. Like there's this outrage that comes out, and they start giving you these responses that are designed to make you think that you're being completely irrational, and only a person who just wasn't thinking straight would come up with a question like that. And then next thing you know, you get this end result.
We also need to do better with at-home testing. So I'm announcing today the federal government will purchase 1/2 billion, that's not million, billion with a B, additional at-home rapid tests with delivery starting in January. We'll be getting these tests to Americans for free. And we'll have websites where you can get them delivered to your home. We've arranged for it to be easier for you to find a free COVID testing site near you on Google. Just enter COVID test near me in the Google search bar. And you can find a number of different locations nearby where you can
Google
get tested.
search bar.
We're going to
What about the
continue to
Yahoo
use the
search
Defense Production Act, as we did earlier this month, to make sure we're producing as many tests and as quickly as possible. The bottom line is it's a lot better than it was, but we're taking even more steps to make it easier to get tested and get tested for free.
So it's just a great contrast, right?
I mean, he literally ends up doing what her sarcastic suggestion is.
What she was mocking as ridiculous. And even in that exchange, the woman kind of called her out like, well, yeah, that's what other countries are doing.
Yeah.
Like, she's so entitled and out of touch that she thinks that that's an own.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what do you think we're going to do? Mail them to everybody? And then next thing you know, Joe Biden's like, we're going to be mailing them to everybody. With that, sort of where he sort of has that like hostage vibe, yes, we are going to be, delivering these to your home. It's just classic. There's another element to this that's more complicated that is true of both parties, which is, there's a lot of sort of unseen negotiation that goes on between the government and a lot of these big companies. And when they say things like, we're going to be delivering this to you for free, well, it's not exactly free usually.
Yeah.
Often what happens is, they've given the company already $1 gazillion to develop whatever it is.
Right.
Whether it's a vaccine or a treatment or a test. So that usually comes from something like an NIH grant. And then when we're in a situation like this, the government does buy up all the stuff at no cost to the taxpayer. In other words, they'll deliver it to you. When you get it, you don't have to pay for it.
Right.
But it comes out of your tax revenue nonetheless. And a significant share of that money ends up becoming profit for those companies. There's an aspect to that story that is kind of annoying on another level. Yeah, this is an area where they absolutely should make this free, right? Yeah. They should definitely do that. But their hesitancy in doing that is belied by the fact that they so frequently, have no hesitation in buying up massive amounts of drugs from these companies, drugs or other medical products from these companies at cost, and don't negotiate the price down and do all these other things. It's just another thing that makes that outrage response by Jen Psaki like, what do you want us to do? Spend the money? Like you don't do that all the time. Like Donald Trump didn't do that. Like he buying 500 million doses of remdesivir or whatever it was. This is just something the governments do. So
yes, and anyway. They should do it. And they're the science party. There's the party that's supposed to be good on COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue they should do it in a different way.
Yeah,
I would argue that they should do it in a way that's takes a little bit more of a bite out of the companies than it does.
Yeah, of course.
Than it does currently. But
right.
Anyway.
Right. Yeah. Which also shows how their commitment to science is compromised by their commitment to pharmaceuticals.
Right. Yeah. Like, aren't you the ones who are deeply committed to making sure that the virus doesn't spread?
Right.
Except when, what was the holdup there? They weren't,
right. Why weren't they already doing that?
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't make any sense.
They wanted to make sure it doesn't spread within the United States.
Right.
But abroad, let it do its thing.
Yeah.
Because we understand science and how viruses respect borders.
Exactly. All right. What do we have for Republican
All right.
Suck?
So for Republican Suck, just going to a piece by Ahmed Twage at Al Jazeera. And if we could just look at the article, what we got there is Representative Tom Massey shared a Christmas photo of his family holding guns on Twitter. And, for people who are just listening, I mean, Matt, you know more about this than I do.
I really don't, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, these are not hunting guns.
Right.
These are...
Are they what, AR-15s? What are they?
Yeah, they are. Would we call them military?
Yeah, I mean they're like automatic rifles.
Automatic rifles.
Well, semi-automatic rifles.
Semi-automatic, semi-autos, semi-automatics. Yeah, and it's
one of those looks like it could be a shotgun.
Which one? The mom's? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's cute because there's a little girl holding one.
She's got like a Tech 9. It looks like.
Yeah. See, I knew you knew more about this than I did. So we got how many kids? I don't know if we got him and the wife. The wife is the most peaceful member of the family with just a good old fashioned shotgun, perhaps.
I mean, the shotgun is the scariest weapon of all.
Oh, really? How come?
Because it'll just blow your face clean off. You might survive some of those other
really
weapons. Yeah.
Why? I thought that they would be making the point of that. It was
well, I mean, the point of the other ones is that you can fire more often, but it's firing a smaller round, like a shotgun shell will just blow your head off.
Right. So you have to have good aim.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I mean, this is in the context of obviously the recent shooting in Michigan.
What is he carrying though?
I don't know. I think the person who Ahmed Twage is a great journalist. He may not be that well versed with guns though, because I don't think there's a lot of, and he captioned it, and this was, 4 days after this came, he tweeted this out 4 days after 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley allegedly killed 4 of his fellow students and injured 7 others at Oxford High School in Michigan. And what was this year's deadliest school shooting? There's a
CNN article. One of the fathers of the kids from the Parkland shooting said that this was that Massey's tweet was in the worst taste ever.
Yeah.
The thing that Massey's holding is the one that looks the most menacing. It looks like one of the alien weapons from like the Avengers.
It's just a creepy photo, I think, in general. The family, even without guns, they look kind of creepy in that photo.
I like how the daughter's gun is sort of aimed sort of at mom's face. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of basics of gun handling, is that you don't want the barrel pointed at anybody, even temporarily. I guess it would miss her face. It might catch the edge of her nose, which she'd probably be all right with.
Yeah, that's not so bad. So yeah, they're all in plaid. Well, not all of them actually. 2 of them are in plaid. They're somewhat color coordinated: maroon, red, blue, green. Christmas tree in back. Yeah, he tweeted that he wanted Santa to bring ammo.
Yeah,
please bring ammo. And then let's look at what in response Lauren Boebert of Colorado tweeted out. So the Boeberts have your 6, Rep. Thomas Massey. No spare ammo for you though. And then it's a picture of her and her much younger than Massey's kids, all holding guns in front of a Christmas tree. Guns that I don't think kids. I mean, how old do you think those kids are?
6, 8, 9.
And then like a 12-year-old or something.
Yeah.
But they're young. I mean, I was about to say the other ones are young. All of them are young. Too young to be holding guns.
The Boeberts have your 6, huh?
It's just scary. Don't like seeing young people, especially with guns.
Yeah, I'm not a gun person. I don't get it. And for me, my objection to guns has always been based on like my own incompetence. Like, I know that if I have a gun in the house, that it's only a matter of time before I shoot some part of my body off, or which hopefully, potentially my head. Yeah. If you look at the statistics of the number of people who have accidental shootings in their homes, like, I don't know how any parent makes the decision to have a gun in the house.
But they do.
People dig it.
I just don't get how you could show your kids holding those guns. It's not like they're hunting rifles either. It's not like, I take my kids out to hunt.
Well, it's for, they would argue it's for target shooting. I mean, you can't have a fully automatic rifle, so it's not for full-blown urban combat or mass slaughter.
Yeah.
Although I guess
mini slaughter.
You could convert them, but
I
don't get it. Like,
you should make that your holiday card. Just swap your kids' heads onto those kids.
That would be funny, actually.
Yeah.
Even the Boeberts, right? Oh, I don't have enough kids to make.
You could leave one of them.
Yeah, I could quickly have another one. It wouldn't happen in time. Yeah.
You could put your face where the oldest kid is.
Right.
Your wife's face where Boebert is, and then you got it.
Right.
People don't know what you look like from the shoulders down.
That's true. That's true.
It could be very short.
I could be. Yeah. And why do they have to do this after every mass shooting?
Yeah, I know. You think that wouldn't you think that they'd have a wait time?
I don't know. Like there's crazy stuff that goes on all over the media, but that particular trope is like a consistently demented facet of the Republican experience. It feels like to me.
You're not allowed. Kids like that shouldn't even be allowed to hold guns like that. By which I mean kids of a certain age.
I think it's probably only a crime if you don't have the appropriate safety facilities in the house or something like that. I don't know. Not something I have to deal with, obviously. I don't have a gun, and I'm not going to get one. Yeah. Although I will say, I know lots of people in the last couple of years who I would never have thought would buy guns, who have bought guns. But they probably don't. I don't think it's a wise decision, but they probably don't make greeting cards with that. But maybe in 5 years they will start to. Maybe we're headed that way. All right. So what do we have for? Isn't that weird? The New York Post is starting to become the go-to publication for this. That's pretty good. For this section, right? The headline is ex-Versace model credits youthful looks to drinking his own urine. It's awesome because they really get the spirit. Actually, the Post always does. Yeah. The Post is consistently good about how this stuff has to be written. Yeah, it is good. The lead is he's making a splash. Very good. An ex-model is crediting his youthful experience to drinking his own urine, flushing it into his rectum and rubbing it onto his skin. It's urine immersion. It's not just drinking it. It's a urine enema. Urenema. Troy Casey traveled the world posing for high fashion labels, including Versace back in the 1980s and 1990s before becoming a life coach. The 55-year-old says he's been able to maintain his model looks and physique thanks to a daily dose of his own pee. Quote, I drink my own urine every morning. I call it hair of the dog, Casey proclaimed in an interview with Newsdog Media. The feeling is electric. Why is it hair of the dog? Does he get drunk on it at night? I don't know. I know that's weird. Or was he trying to pander to the Newsdog Media? Maybe. It makes no sense though, yeah. The former fashion darling first heard about urine therapy, known as Shivambu in Ayurvedic medicine, back in 2004. And there's this picture of him. He does look pretty young. What do you say? I wouldn't guess 55, would you? Maybe it's not a great angle of him. Maybe I would guess 55. Maybe that's just confirmation bias and he looks 65 or something. I wouldn't have said that this is like an unnaturally youthful looking 55-year-old. I mean, he looks kind of like Cast Away. Tolstoy during the Anna Karenina period. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Also, he's holding a green juice, which I'm hoping is not his urine. Soon after, he decided to sample his own pee and was pleasantly surprised. Quote, it wasn't as bad as the mental barrier in my own mind, the ex-catwalk star reminisced. I felt a cool buzz. Intuitively, it just felt good. I drank my urine on and off for a while from there. Casey began drinking his own urine on a daily basis back in 2008 and hasn't looked back. He has even completed a 7-day urine fast, drinking nothing but his own waste liquids for an entire week. The resourceful health guru now uses his urine in other ways as well. Oh, God. All right. Casey claimed he bottles his pee, lets it ferment, and uses it in an enema. I would cultivate my own urine and ferment it in a sealed mason jar for 2 weeks before transferring it into my rectum, he explained. Aged urine enemas are so powerful for your health, and I got my six-pack abs after doing them. I flushed out my gut, and that's when I really got ripped. The former model also uses urine as a moisturizer. Okay, we can just... Casey, who previously hit headlines for claiming, thanks for highlighting this, Wilson, for claiming there were health benefits to sunning his anus, has more than 120,000 Instagram followers who look to him for unorthodox wellness advice. Yeah. Oh my God. And there's a photo of him. How would you describe this? This is a yoga position, happy baby, I think. He's on his back, totally naked, and his legs are up in the air, and he's
holding his feet in his hands.
But he's aiming his rectum at the sun.
He's sunning his rectum.
Yeah.
He's doing
how
sun
the sun feels
salutation
about
with
that.
his rectum. Yeah, I know. I do wonder that.
Just like trying to aim a little bit of extra heat that way, you know?
I thought when they said sunning his anus, I just thought he'd be lying on his stomach. But I guess he has to really expose it. He could have some like, that wouldn't sun it. It wouldn't sun it. You'd have to use some kind of apparatus. Like when you get a pedicure, they put stuff between your toes. Oh my God, it says butthole sunning, charging up the body. Yes, it's a real thing. They put like foam. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's things that go between your toes. So you'd have to have some kind of spacer.
Right, yeah.
Teeth, but not covering the rectum, the anus.
Right. Is there a video? Do we get to watch the
video?
All right, let's watch the video.
Okay, here we go. Here's my empty cup. Let's fill it up. Usually I do this first thing in the morning. The first pee has all the stem cells, amino acids, hair of the dog.
What does that mean? So he's peeing now. You can't see.
He's peeing pretty vigorously.
Yeah, he is.
And whatever ails you, it's going to give you a nice little tune-up, energetically, hydrogen-rich.
Now he's yeah.
To your health. God bless you.
He doesn't look that young. I think if he shaved the beard. I guess his body looks young.
I guess, yeah. The body looks.
The beard is aging.
Maybe if he didn't drink his pee, he'd look like
Old Man Time, Rip Van Winkle.
Yeah, or Benjamin Button or whoever, you know?
Yeah.
I don't even know who a young, good-looking actor is nowadays. Who's a young, good?
I see what you're saying. I don't know. Who is young?
Like my first thought was Robert Pattinson, but he's old now.
Who is that?
He was the guy in those one of those good-looking vampire movies, Twilight.
Oh, right. Okay, so he's young enough, right?
No, but he'd be
like Timothy Chalamet now. This guy, if he stopped drinking his pee.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was that.
Matt, are you stuck on what to give your friends and family this year?
I am. Totally.
Well, here's my idea. Wish them a merry softness and happy new rear. And with new comfy underwear, loungewear, and pajamas from Tommy John. And how we're going to do Happy Hanukkah and Happy Kwanzaa in that pun language. We'll have to come back to you for that one.
Yeah. Tommy John loungewear's luxuriously soft tri-blend and micromodal fabrics mean 4-way stretch and no lint balls or fuzz, Katie.
With over 17 million pairs sold, Matt, giving the gift of Tommy John underwear and loungewear has become a holiday tradition for families all across the country. 97% of women and men love getting a gift from Tommy John.
Well, I know. Look, there is one talking point I want to get into.
Okay. Oh, I know what it's going to be. Yeah.
Tommy John has a no wedgie guarantee.
Yeah. How many other companies can you say that for?
So that's interesting. Like, I'd like to find out. I'd like to test that. Does that mean like they guarantee
that it can't be done? Like,
no, yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
right? That's yeah.
Organically, are they promising you won't ever end up with a wedgie? But what happens if a bunch of dudes from the neighborhood decide?
Yeah, you should photograph that or videograph that and then ask for your money back.
Yeah.
Just give yourself a wedgie and say, there's a wedgie right there.
Right. I
think what they mean, but I still think we can nail them on this legally. But I think what they mean is it won't ride up and give you a wedgie. The underwear won't spontaneously wedgie you.
But if jerks decide to give you one.
Yeah. Then there's no Tommy.
I mean, that would be an amazing product if it was.
That would be.
Like every nerd in the country would have to buy that. Have you ever been party to a wedgieing?
No. Have you?
I have. I've been on both ends.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I have the shame of having wedgied somebody, but I've also been wedgied.
Well, it's a cycle of abuse. You probably wedgied after being wedgied.
I can't remember. I mean, I was the abused nerd before I was the mean person.
Exactly, of course.
In high school.
Middle
school is basically when you get your most wedgies, right?
I guess, yeah. I was spared. So
it's more of a dude thing, right?
It is more of a dude thing, yeah.
I've seen somebody have their underwear actually pulled out of their pants, like ripped.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Who did that?
I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't stop it though, so that's on my conscience.
You were like, it was like a Kitty Genovese case of wedging.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to find that victim, make amends, apologize.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, if I ever join AA, that'll be one of the first things I have to do, right?
Yeah. Or Wedgie or WA or
Wedgers Anonymous.
Or Wedgie by WBA, Wedgie Bystanders Anonymous.
Wedgie Bystanders Anonymous. Yeah. Yeah, get $20 off site-wide right now at TommyJohn.com/useful. That's TommyJohn.com/useful for $20 off, Katie. Order by December 21st to get it in time for Christmas. TommyJohn.com/useful. See site for details. What do we have next?
So for Isn't That Terrible, we have something that we talk about a lot on the show.
No.
Which is no, it's not necrophilia, although there was a necrophilia story, but I decided not to go there, even though it raised a lot of interesting questions, because necrophilia, the crime, is only 2 years in England. They want to make it longer. And I really was aware, I really got how bad it is and this is why my position is so consistent. I've always said if they have family members, you can't do it. It only is okay. It's only a victimless crime when the victim is a hermit.
Who you find dead opportunistically.
Right, a hermit who you've not killed. I've always maintained that.
So opportunistic necrophilia.
Yes, opportunistic hermit-based necrophilia.
Right.
Because these people are really upset. There's a guy who works in a morgue, which is, of course, a great place to work if you're that. And the relatives are very upset. Luckily, I mean, not luckily, but I think he actually killed people also. So he's going to be locked up for that. But they did, under English law, they determined, and this is very radical, more radical than I am, they did determine under British law that it was a victimless crime. They didn't even have the loophole I have. So, anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess I'm outside of the mainstream in America, but I'm actually kind of conservative.
The world is coming around.
Yeah.
It may even have raced past you.
It definitely has, yeah, in England, yeah. But the other terrible story is the UN talks to ban slaughter bots collapsed. So slaughter bots are weapons that select and apply force to targets without human intervention. They make their decisions with artificial intelligence software, which is essentially a series of algorithms. For the first time this year, the bulk of the 125 nations that belong to the UN Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons said they wanted new laws to be introduced on killer robots. However, some countries that are developing these weapons, including the US and Russia, were in opposition, making a unilateral agreement impossible. So this is scary. Slaughter bots are scary. We've talked about them before. We've shown that scene from RoboCop. And also...
drones are also kind of slaughter bots.
Right. That's true. Drones are slaughter bots.
They usually, I mean... They can make their decisions based on algorithmic calculations.
Right.
Like if the data they get in has enough markers, like military age male in a certain area with a gun or whatever it is like that. I think they can work like that.
Yeah.
But
I don't know,
anyway.
They're already being used. On the battlefield. In Libya, Kargu drones made by Turkey's STM have been used in the nation's civil war. According to a UN report published in March, these Kargu drones are small, portable, rotary wing attack drones that provide precision strike capabilities for ground troops, according to STM's website. And they were used in Libya to hunt down retreating soldiers, according to the UN report, which is disgusting. It's really gross. They look similar to normal consumer drones, but they have a gun attached, and they're fairly inexpensive to buy and relatively easy to mass produce.
Yeah, I think drones on the whole are are about to make our lives basically unlivable.
Yeah, what can we do?
Nothing. They're here to stay. They're like, think about what's going to happen with, they already have, like, for instance, in Britain, that CCTV system where if you're walking along a public street, you're probably on a police camera somewhere, and they use that as a major law enforcement tool. How far off are we from being in a world where all the time there are drones overhead that are going to just sort of take pictures of everything, and it's going to become, our version of Orwell's telescreens.
Yeah.
There's that thing. And then there's the whole, the fact that the notion of using drones instead of piloted aircraft, as a way to assassinate people and provide support in ground operations or whatever it is, that's already so taken over, like, our whole thinking about how war works. I don't think there's any going back from that.
Yeah. What do we?
And it's so destructive. I mean, look at the Yemen thing. I mean, that almost. I mean, it wasn't entirely, but it was significantly a drone-caused disaster.
Right.
We're a huge part of that.
Maybe that can be your next book.
It's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. Also, another Isn't That Terrible? I just want to do a kind of PSA. Procter and Gamble recalled a bunch of products, aerosol products, and dry shampoo. And so make sure you get rid of your shampoos, your dry conditioner, your dry shampoos by, if the brands are Waterless, Pantene, Aussie, Herbal Essences, and Hair Food, Coconut Dry Shampoo, Old Spice Fiji Dry Shampoo, Old Spice Pure Dry Shampoo. It's terrible that they have a carcinogen in it. It's good that they voluntarily recalled it, but it's bad they put it in there.
Right. Yeah.
So that's this week's Isn't That Useful to Know? Thank you so much, Useful Idiots.
Yeah.
segment.
No, we did that purely as a public service.
Mm-hmm.
Good for us. Yeah.
Good for us. Yeah.
So, okay, well, that was the 4 food groups.
Yeah.
So, Katie, do you want to explain what we have coming up?
Oh, yeah. So we got some great guests coming on the show. We are going to be talking to Danny Sjursen. He is a U.S. Army officer with combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's the director of the Eisenhower Media Network, which is an organization of critical and independent expert former military intelligence and civilian national security officials, and the author of 3 books, Patriotic Descent, Ghost Riders of Baghdad, and A True History of the United States, and Matthew Ho, who is a senior fellow with the Center for International Policy and a member of the Eisenhower Media Network. He is a 100% disabled Marine combat veteran, and in 2009, he resigned his position with the State Department in Afghanistan in protest of the escalation of the war.
So let's, without further ado, talk to those individuals.
Yes, Matthew and Danny. Noom Weight is a psychology-based approach to getting people on track to eating healthier. It takes a more empathetic direction to building sustainable habits for longer-lasting results. Noom. Sign up for your trial and get psychology-based support and motivation to reach your goals at noom.com/idiots. That's NOOM.com/idiots. Noom. N as in Nancy, OOM as in Matthew. Taibbi. Not the Taibbi part, just Noom. Not Noomt, Noom. And instead of making you feel guilt or regret, Noom empowers you to keep going. And I know that's been helpful for me. Noom, because sometimes you can feel like you fell off track and then what's the point? But with Noom, you don't have to look at it that way. You can just get back on it. Noom. So start building better habits for healthier long-term results. It's kind of like moon backwards. Actually, it is exactly moon backwards. Sign up for your trial at noom.com/idiot. That's NOOM.com/idiots. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. There's so much we can ask you about. I want to actually start off by talking about Build Back Better, especially because you, Danny, wrote a piece about the way the United States makes decisions in terms of budgets. You wrote a piece at Newsweek about this called Pinching Pennies for People, but Endless Cash for War. And you wrote that before the whole, Joe Manchin debacle. But can you talk about what the Democrats are doing, what the Republicans are doing, and how that relates to your experience in the military?
Well, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked about this. It's becoming more and more apparent that the only thing that, they want to build back better in Congress for sure is unusable nuclear weapons and F-35s that cost a lot and might fly, and basically put money into the pockets of the war industry. And, I don't say that as just some other, dismissed hippie peacenik. I mean, both Matt and I spent basically careers in the military, or in Matt's case, military and State Department. But it's absurd. And where do we see this? There's an idea that politics are so tribal now. Republicans, Democrats can't agree on anything, especially after Trump. And of course, there's some truth in that, depending on the issue. But the one bipartisan issue, it seems, or the remaining one in Congress, is military spending. I mean, almost nobody has the guts to vote against obscene budgets that grow like the universe into perpetuity, which I still don't understand, but I'm not a science guy. They will not vote against that because, especially since 9/11, it appears that if you don't support endless military budgets, well, you're certainly a paltry patriot and maybe not even American, and you probably work for Putin or something, right? And so Build Back Better, really is over the course of basically 10 years. So the amount of money that actually is being spent annually for real people, right? So actual social spending is really pretty minimal compared to 768 or whatever billion, 25 billion more than the president asked for, right? Than the Pentagon asked for, that Congress added on.
And that's just the standard military budget, by the way. It doesn't include a whole host of other stuff that people don't know about in state and other agencies, that it's actually military spending, right?
That's right. And Matt, what do we often say about Matt Ho? 1.25 trillion, give or take, or 1.3 trillion is the actual national security budget. And the last thing I'll say about that is, if you look at the budget and you look at our performance and you look what we're actually spending it on, this is a national security budget that should be in quotes because it doesn't secure us. It doesn't secure the American people. It's often counterproductive and wildly wasteful.
For years, I want to ask you this question, like why this doesn't get covered, because for years, whenever the budget numbers came out for the military, I would write a column almost annually noting that nobody was covering it, unless there was some kind of weird culture war angle on the budget. Like a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember, there was an issue that Donald Trump hadn't used the name of John McCain whose name was in the bill, and that became how they talked about the passage of the record budget. But is this just a problem of media that they don't like to cover issues that the parties agree on, or is it something deeper than that?
I think it's twofold. I mean, first of all, there's the follow the money trail, and it doesn't help that a lot of the major media conglomerates are sort of complicit, if not profiting, and invested, a lot of the owners, in the same kind of war industry spending. So it's, would go against the bottom line to do it. But I also think there's a cultural component where we don't talk about this. It's the one sacred cow in American society seems to be the military. Now, no one in power really cares about the troops, or they wouldn't send them on boondoggles that can't be won, but they're a really great political tool. So I think that there's that cultural angle, but you're right about how the culture war issues are the ones that get mentioned. So as far as I could tell, there's really only three things that have gained any real resonance in the debate about this massive, obscene spending bill that doesn't secure us. There's whether women should be drafted. That gets a lot of articles written about it. Anything involving whether we're going to take the control of the legality on sexual assault charges, which are littering the military, out of the hands of commanders, which I think should be the case. And then the third one is there's spending for a UFO research study. That's just for the first time open source in this bill. I mean, there's some treasure troves of absurdity in this bill, but you'll see more coverage of that. So I have to agree with you completely. And it raises some serious questions about our political culture.
Did you have any experiences in the field that sort of awoke you to the absurdities of the contracting situation? We had a guest on previously who served in Afghanistan and talked about being forced to use a new communication system before his troops have been trained up in it, just because a contractor wanted to put it in the field early. Did you have experiences like that spoke to that problem?
Well, certainly, and I'll mention one, and then if it's all right, I'm gonna hand over to Matthew Ho at this point, because I know that on both the military and State Department side, he's probably seen more grotesque things than me. But one example is that as a company commander in Afghanistan down in Kandahar, which is sort of like the home turf of the Taliban, right? The idea that we could ever win down there was sort of ridiculous. It's like the Yankees going to Fenway Park. It's a tough place to play, Anyway. We had something called the Cash for Work program. We called it CFW, but we really should have called it the Cash for Pretending to Work program. And at one point, we had about 1,200 Afghans who we basically paid not to attack us, and they would pretend to dig ditches or paint roads. And we're talking backpacks full of cash that would just kind of be handed out. And not only is this taxpayer money, but the waste of it and the idea that it was so short term. It didn't do anything except further fuel sort of a black market economy. We knew a lot of it ended up in the hands of the Taliban. But then there were other examples of, like you said, different weapon systems. We'd constantly be trying, like, ways to find IEDs that never worked. But if you looked at who built the system that we were forced to pilot and find out it didn't work, sometimes by stepping on an IED, it was usually going back to, Raytheon, Lockheed, or one of their subsidiaries with a funny name that no one's ever heard of. But I know for sure that Matthew Ho has a lot of interesting experience here, especially when he was working for the State Department in Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah. Well, the same in Iraq, too. I had the same program in Iraq. I had about 5,000 Iraqis doing the same thing, Cash for Work program. I mean, we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars every week. And the insurgency got bigger and bigger every week. I think the most dramatic example I can think of didn't occur, though, in Afghanistan or Iraq. In 2008, I led a Department of Defense counter-suicide bomber team, and we were responsible for finding technologies to defeat suicide bombers. And we did all these tests. We would go up to Massachusetts, which is one of the Air Force research labs up there, and just run tests on all this different equipment, cameras and imaging devices and scanning technology, all kinds of things. And what we found was the only two things that actually worked to find a suicide bomber was the $600,000 machines that TSA uses, or the $3,000 metal detector that you have in every courthouse in the United States. Nothing else worked. And so our report back and our recommendation was to buy these $3,000 metal detectors. Because what was happening in 2008 was Iraq was having elections coming up. So we were under pressure to find something to dissuade suicide bombers from attacking people going to the polls. And this was the answer. And the response I got back from SES, Senior Executive Service people who were part of the Department of Defense, Department of the Army particularly, their response was, no way, it doesn't cost enough. No one will go with this because it doesn't cost enough. And honestly, I ended up having to go to Congress to talk about this. I think Bill Young, was the, at that time was I think he was the either the chair or the ranking member for the House's Appropriations Committee for Defense. And had to go in there and defend this, and the contractors coming in. I mean, it is just one machine. And it is a money spending machine. It is the parlance we use in the military is the self-licking ice cream cone. You find justifications for things. And this has, I think people really need to get that this is one of the ways that the wars affect us here at home. When you talk about these budgets and the fact that we have, whether or not you believe economically that deficits and debt matter, it matters politically. Because that's the whole basis behind what both Democrats and Republicans use to justify whether or not we pay to replace pipes with lead in them in this country, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so when you have that, when you have this $1.25 trillion spending every year, and the third biggest item in that, after defense and after veterans affairs is about $200 billion a year. The third biggest item. So if this item was its own agency, right? Its own department, it would be the third biggest department budget-wise in the whole federal government. And that item is debt and interest payments on past military spending and war. We are spending over $150 billion per year on past military spending, whether debt payments or interest payments. The total for the Iraq and Afghan wars, just in debt payments, is $1 trillion already. I mean, so it has a real effect on us, because when you go back and you look at spending, federal spending over the last 20 years, everything that's not defense related either has remained flat or has declined in terms of outlays. And remember, we've grown as a nation by 50 million people. So, I mean, this has a very real effect on us. You want to know why our bridges and roads need to be, the backlog for that. I mean, all the examples, we could be here all day talking about all the different things we could be spending money on, but we don't. And the corollary of this, and I think this really ties into a lot of, what we see in this country, I think, with regards to support for Trump and the Republicans, and the whole issue of the deaths of despair. That issue that is being spoken about more. But one of the one of the things that makes people angry is that people are getting rich off of this. And so as you see the defense spending, the military, the war spending increase, everything else remain flat or decline. What happens is Washington, D.C. becomes the wealthiest part of the country. Up until around 2003, 2004, the wealthiest part of the country was Silicon Valley. Before that, it was, New York. At other time, it was Tulsa and Dallas because of the oil and gas, right? And now the wealthiest part of the country since around 2004 or so, 2005, because of the defense spending, because there's nothing else besides the bank bailouts, right, are the Washington, D.C. suburbs. I mean, so this has a very real effect on people.
Yeah, I guess on that, I've said it a few times before, and it's only partly tongue in cheek. Nation building hasn't worked in Iraq, certainly not Syria, and definitely not Afghanistan. But nation building has been super effective in the Northern Virginia suburbs, where everyone used all that war industry money to put like actual building of extensions on their houses.
Right. I thought it was interesting also that you quoted in your piece, Danny, you quoted someone who had said, every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are sold and are not clothed, which I would have thought was like a JFK quote, but is actually Eisenhower.
Yeah, that's, one of the reasons that Eisenhower's a complicated guy, right? So some of his policies, especially involving the CIA in Guatemala and Iran, were pretty obscene. But he also kind of had the Pentagon's number. He's a 1915 grad of West Point. He's kind of horrified by what he sees in World War II, despite sort of leading the victory against Germany. But he also understands the generals, and he understands how the war industry and the funding works. And so actually he spends most of his tenure, 8 years, battling with his generals over things like strategy, over things like spending. The Air Force wants more money for strategic bombing and nukes, and the Navy wants more ships. And he kind of has the credentials or the credibility to sort of say no. And they actually had revolted against him. There's something called the Revolt of the Generals. It was more metaphorical. But, I kind of saw this coming. He lists out in that speech further on that I quoted the exact cost. He says, one bomber is this many grain silos and one battleship is this many schools. And then in his final address, his farewell address, which is probably the most famous besides Washington's, he coins the term sort of military industrial complex, really pointing out how dangerous this is. And it's fascinating that it was a Republican, because I just can't really see that happening today, except maybe from some of the libertarian type Republicans, maybe.
Yeah. And, I just to chime in on the Eisenhower, because I one of his quotes is my favorite of all time. He was standing in the Oval Office and he looks at his chair and he says, I pity this nation when someone sits in that chair who does not understand the military like I do. And he wasn't talking about a tactician or strategy or logistics. He was saying because the admirals and generals lie all the time. That's what Eisenhower was talking about. And JFK said more or less the same thing. You can't trust these people. They lie all the time.
Matthew, you were recently critical of the Columbia Dean of Journalism, Steve Cole, and he had a comment about Afghanistan. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Steve Cole, who wrote the book Ghost Wars, which is within Washington, D.C. in the foreign policy and military community, is more or less the authoritative source for most officers and diplomats' knowledge. And it's a pretty good book. But one of the things you see is that it's a one-sided book. And Stephen Cole just published in a long piece on the secret history of the U.S. diplomatic failure. is the title of it. And it is, again, very one-sided. You can go through this piece, and there's a part 2 coming out, so maybe it will be better in the second part. But you can go through his piece, and you will find no quotes from anyone who has never not been on the U.S. payroll. Everyone he talks to has either been a U.S. official or an Afghan official, all on the U.S. payroll. And that one-sidedness causes him to leave out a lot of context, leave out a lot of history, leave out a lot of uncomfortable truths about the war. He speaks, at length about the back and forth between various American and Afghan officials, but there's no commentary from anyone besides those officials. And then, of course, we can get into what he missed in the history. He gets the history of Afghanistan wrong in terms of modern history. He just leaves out the fact that violence in Afghanistan had killed 100,000 people by the time the Soviet Union invaded. So he goes with kind of that myth that everything was good until the Soviet Union invaded, leaving out the U.S.'s culpability in Afghanistan from the start. He leaves out the great the way that the Taliban consistently tried to negotiate from 2001 through 2009 with the U.S. I mean, consistently. And was one of the reasons why I resigned was because we would not talk to the Taliban. We had a military victory approach to Afghanistan. He leaves all this out. He doesn't discuss about, well, what happens when you put a 250,000-man army in Afghanistan, which is what Barack Obama did. He went from having 60,000 U.S. and NATO troops and contractors to 250,000 U.S. and NATO troops and contractors in Afghanistan within a year of being in office, more or less. What happens when you go for a military victory and you lose? Well, this past summer was what happens when you lose. He leaves all that out. So I mean, we could do a whole show on that. Probably the longest tweet chain I've ever done. Right. I was obviously fired up and maybe had too much coffee, but yeah. So, but I appreciate you bringing that up, Matt, because the way I ended that too, it's important that this stuff is understood and is spoken about correctly and thoroughly and, holistically, because so many millions of people suffered. And so to paint this with it was really just Trump's fault, or things were going good until Biden pulled out the troops, or, any other tropes that we hear from the foreign policy establishment over and over again, which is just complete BS. That does such a disservice to everyone who suffered and the families of those who suffered, both Americans and Afghans, Pakistanis. I mean, like, the list is huge in terms of how much misery has been inflicted because of 40 plus years of war. So I think it's important that we when people who particularly are prominent, who have this authoritative position like Cole does, when they're missing stuff, we have to say, look, man, you're missing it. This is not right.
Can I just follow up by asking, do you think, how much of the blame for that kind of thing do you place on the embed system? Like when I was in Iraq, I remember the first time I had to be escorted to the bathroom. And I thought to myself, well, if I can't go anywhere, if I can't even go to the bathroom without a military official, trailing behind me, I'm probably only going to get one kind of story out of this experience. And after that, you start to think, morally, is it correct to accept these conditions? But there are a lot of journalists who've covered these wars and have never been not been embedded. Does that leave them to only see one side of the story, or is what's going on there?
Yeah, and that's really purposeful. They were quite brilliant. The folks in the Pentagon in 2002, 2003, when they came up with this, and they really put into place. And this was something that comes out of Vietnam, where the United States military sees the press as the enemy. And then you have officers after Vietnam who say, hey, maybe we've got this wrong. Maybe we can utilize the press. They're certainly not our friends, but we can manipulate them. David Petraeus writes his thesis on one of the parts of his thesis is about the media in Vietnam. How we can manipulate them, how we could do it better this time. And so what they do, Matt, is, we put a guy like you or a guy like Katie, right? You embed them, you have them with these young men and women for 30 days, 45 days, 2 months. You fall in love with those kids.
Exactly.
Right? So you're going to go back and you're going to write something bad about them?
Right.
Come on.
They're
let alone
your
denying
life.
the access. Right. I mean, the fact that if hey, Matt Taibbi or Katie Halper, you don't write the right stuff, you're not. And I saw that. I've seen that over and over again. Reporting from hearing from Diane Sawyer level contacts about like, well, if we say that, then Martha Raddatz isn't going to be able to go on the helicopter with General McChrystal. I mean, that's the level. That's how they do a carrot and stick, and they do it very well. And folks have read Azmat Khan's reporting in the New York Times this week, and you read that about the civilian casualties caused by American airstrikes. And you say, how could they miss this? How could you miss all this? Well, they're not out there. Like you said, Matt, they're just with the U.S. troops. We used to call them dog and pony shows, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. Journalists would show up or any other kind of VIP. We had a whole thing planned, a whole, if people remember the old Chevy Chase film, Funny Farm, cue the deer. I mean, that was literally what we were doing in terms of making sure everything was perfect and I think we're dating ourselves, because I look at Katie's face. Looks like she's never seen Funny Farm or even heard of it.
I haven't. I love Chevy Chase though.
Well, it was that movie was based on a town because I went to the same school as Chevy Chase. It was based on a town called Red Hook, but in the movie it's called Red Butt. Anyway, I used to live there. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
but the whole thing is about manufacturing the image. And, so you would show up, journalists would show up, VIPs, politicians, whoever, and you would take them to the courthouse that you just built. You take them to the schools where literally by point of rifle, school kids were there that day. I mean, you coordinated this with your Afghan and Iraqi partners well in advance, and then you had it and you perfected it. And every time someone else came, you took it out and you did it over again. And that's what people saw. And that's what people took away as truth. And then, of course, the carrot and stick. Why go against the grain of that, with the exception of a few journalists? And I mean, what you see, though, I think one of the things that comes out of Azmat's reporting, and she is so good, people can go back. And I first became a fan of hers in 2015. She wrote a big expose for either Daily Beast or BuzzFeed about how all these schools we had supposedly built in Afghanistan, they weren't there. You can't find them. Right. I mean, Azmat simply did, Nangal is another great example. Go out and do the work rather than saying, oh, hey, the United States has built 3,000 schools. Oh, we went out and we looked for them. We couldn't find 80% of them. I mean, that type of reporting has been missing. And what you see, though, is getting to a point about Azmat's work is she talks about how there's a shift in U.S. policy. And this is really important, I think, for people to understand. A shift in U.S. warfighting policy that begins around 2013, 2014. George Bush had his large Iraq war, right? Ground war. Barack Obama had his large Afghan ground war. Both were incredibly unpopular. Both had political consequences. The Democrats win the midterms in 2006 because of Iraq. Barack Obama beats Hillary Clinton in 2008 because of Iraq. Barack Obama beats McCain in 2008 because of Iraq. I know I'm simplifying. There's other things, but that's a big thing. 2016, there was work done by folks at Harvard and the University of Minnesota that show that Donald Trump wins.
I saw this.
Wins in counties, in certain counties in important states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, I forget where else, maybe Wisconsin. Donald Trump wins in counties that had disproportionate rates of casualties from these wars. And that Donald Trump portrayed himself as an anti-war guy. He wasn't, but he portrays himself. And there is some really good evidence. So these wars have political consequences. What happens when you switch from these large ground-based wars is the media goes away. And that's how you have happened, even though in Afghanistan, as the war gets worse every year, as more civilians by the thousands die every year, by the Taliban getting stronger every year, the U.S. is spending $300 million a day in Afghanistan. And from 2014 up until the summer of 2021, the U.S. networks cover Afghanistan for 5 minutes a year. Right. And that's how the wars can continue. And one of the things I will say, because I think this is important to get across to people, because people are in the peace movement and progressive movement, anti-imperialist movement, whatever you describe yourself, You get frustrating. You wonder whether or not you're making a difference. You are making a difference because that was the shift. And why was that shift? Because of public opinion having a political effect. And even though the wars become hidden, public opinion still is against the war. So even though this past summer, where the entire media establishment, with the exception of a few folks, right, like yourselves, are going along with the line about how pulling out of Afghanistan is a mistake, and we were going so well before this, everything else. So even in the scenes from Kabul and the way it's portrayed and everything else, you still have 74% of Americans saying Joe Biden did the right thing, right? I mean, so the wars are unpopular, not because we're war weary, but because people know these wars are purposeless, they're counterproductive, they're immoral, and they're failed. And so that's why they don't go along.
And to hear the rest of the interview, please go to usefulidiots.substack.com.
Everyone likes a great deal, like savings, markdowns, and lunch specials. But when it comes to car insurance, we know the right place to go. State Farm offers surprisingly great rates for your ride. Your friends don't have to have a special connection or even call in a favor. State Farm has options like insuring your ride and your home, getting you great rates on both. Why are these such surprisingly great rates? It's what you get from them. Coverage that meets your needs. Because insurance shouldn't put a hole in your wallet. Those good neighbors are in your corner. No promo codes, no waiting around for holiday deals, and no sales section. State Farm fits your life at prices that fit your budget. So where do you go for surprisingly great rates? It's State Farm. Because like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
That was great.
Yeah, it was great.
It's infuriating. The lack of coverage about the military.
Yeah.
Both about the spending issue and about the activities of the U.S. military. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is.
And even just in our lifetimes, if you think about it, Iraq and the issues they referenced, our presence in Afghanistan, they had such a major impact on liberal thinking in the 2000s.
Right.
And then suddenly, it just sort of magically happened that it no longer was a thing.
Because Obama?
Was it Obama? What exactly happened? It's kind of a mystery to me.
I think it was in large part Obama, right?
I guess so.
He was like the good guy, got a Nobel Peace Prize.
Right, I guess, because now he's prosecuting our wars, and so we don't want to go after him for that.
Right.
Yeah,
the nuclear thing is so scary. The nuclear winter.
Oh, God. Yeah, oh, yeah.
Maybe we should be making posters about that and stickers.
The whole idea that there are some people who think it's the numbers even lower than that. That wouldn't even be 100 warheads. It'd be less than that. That would be necessary to end all life. And so a limited exchange in India and Pakistan would certainly be a species threatening event. But the probably more serious problem is something like an accidental exchange between us and China or us and Russia, which, as they mentioned, has happened.
Yeah, really scary stuff.
We've come so close to that, so many times. It's nuts. It's really, it's one of those amazing issues that gets zero coverage. Yeah.
Even though it would kill everyone.
Right. Well, but think about the whole galaxy of things that we don't cover, right? From nuclear war to, the possibility of accidental nuclear discharge to corruption within the military.
Spending,
Once upon a time, it was, you had things like the movie with Kelsey Grammer in it, where about the Bradley fighting vehicle. The public was sort of kind of interested in overspending in the Pentagon.
Yeah,
and there's just zero interest in any of that stuff anymore. It's amazing. Anyway, those guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, they are.
All right, Katie.
All right, Matt.
Have a good holiday, however you celebrate it.
I celebrate Christmas.
Who's going to be there?
Jesus. That's what you do, right? You pray to Jesus on
I hope you're praying to Jesus. If you
Well, my parents will be there and my cousin.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah. And you?
Excellent. Kids, wife, stepmother.
Good crew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good entourage, yeah.
All right, everybody.
Stay safe, everyone.
Have a happy holiday. We'll talk to you again.
Fight Omicron. Bye.
Bye-bye. This episode is brought to you by the Jordan Harbinger Show. Want a new podcast to look forward to each week? One that's entertaining, informative, and packed with actionable content? Come on, of course you do. The average podcast listener has 6 shows in rotation, so you're most likely not just listening to Useful Idiots or, I don't know, whatever another podcast would be called. What's another podcast?
Well, we don't listen to PodSave. Nobody does that. Nobody listens to the Lincoln Project.
So you're most likely not just listening to Useful Idiots and some other terrible podcasts. And that's totally okay. In fact, I'd love to share a podcast to add to your list. It's the Jordan Harbinger Show, a top shelf podcast named Best of Apple in 2018. Guests include Anderson Cooper, Matthew McConaughey, Mark Cuban, and even Ulrich the Mole Larson. You can't go wrong with adding the Jordan Harbinger Show to your rotation. It's incredibly interesting. There's never a dull show. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show. That's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit jordanharbinger.com/start.
Hello, thank you so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For full episodes and extended interviews, please subscribe at usefulidiots.substack.com. You can subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/usefulidiots for clips, live streams, and full episodes. Also, subscribe to us wherever you find your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod and use the hashtag UsefulIdiotsPod. Join us Mondays at 10 a.m. for the Useful Idiots Monday Morning Show, where we discuss the Sunday morning news shows so you don't have to watch them.